It's great to have you here and great to talk and get to know each other. That's the goal here, but it is important now to eat. Everybody, it is important now to eat. Grab your food if you could. It's right over to the over to this side, and we're going to have some chance to get to know each other a little better here, but let's do it on a full stomach.
I think I got the radio. I'm not going to. I'm going to purposely.
Oh, okay. It was like, I don't know that I was on the radio.
Well, that's what.
It's every other one.
Oh, is that what it is?
Please move over and grab some food. Normally, I don't think I have to tell Minnesotans to eat, but I will. Please come on over and get the food and come back so we can get rolling here.
I'm Jocelyn.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you.
Oh, perfect.
I don't think I've ever met you before.
You've been lucky. I think so far.
So what is it for the, so you're one of the city council members?
I represent the 4th Ward, which is most of downtown,
Oh,
and the core
okay.
neighborhoods,
Does
far
that-
southeast.
Okay, so that includes the, what is that area just right next to St. Mary's?
No, I go from 6th, so just on the other side, it runs right up along Osmond is right on the edge. So it runs, my ward ends where the Osmond is.
It's like they found a way to reuse a bunch of blackberries.
Yeah.
Okay.
How you doing, Tony? Thanks for all your care and feeding.
Remember us all?
Probably stuff. Cool.
How long have you been?
I'm in my
only
11th
been-
year.
11 years. I've only been in Rochester.
His nephew. He's nice. Doing well.
Which is
You know, it just, it's kind of interesting. There's always whatever we got.
Oh, yes. Is that right? How was Donna doing?
Well, that's neat. We meet with our colleagues from other cities in our nation and we ask, how do you
Well, we'll probably do DMC.
I'm actually probably one of the.
You sign well? Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Mark, one of my favorite people.
Appreciate that. Yeah, that process is a little challenging.
Everyone, it is great to see you here. I'm R.T. Rybak. I am chair of the Destination Medical Center Board, and it is wonderful to have this group here today. We've just finished a meeting of the Destination Medical Center Board where we did a lot today, but one of the big things we did is that transportation, which is probably the core to what we're trying to do, saw huge progress as we agreed on locations for 2 parking ramps that are going to be a lot more than parking ramps. We want to work with you and the rest of the community to make sure they are mobility villages, and that's just part of the work that we have. And we can get into all of that today, but the main thing we wanted to do is to get to know each other a little better. That is not just because we're all friendly here in Rochester, but it's really important for this coalition that's working together to try to move this community forward, to work together even better and more ongoing. So we're going to have some facilitated conversation about some big issues. We also just want to have a bit of a free-flowing conversation as well. But we want to start it by having people go around and introduce themselves and do it crisply in a way that can make sure that we have time for the discussion. Jim Beer made me promise not to call in here with his mouth full. Are you eating or not right now,
I'm
Jim?
good.
So I think Jim Beer could actually begin all of that and model for us the crisp, clean way to give us a sense of who you are and what you're doing, but also to keep us focused. Jim Beer.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim Beer, Olmsted County Board Chair. I represent District 5, which is the northwest part of Rochester and the city of Byron and some of the country.
Kim Norton, is that working? Close enough. Kim Norton, new mayor of Rochester, Minnesota.
Sheila Cascaden, Olmsted County Board of Commissioners.
Jim Kimball, Director of the Destination Medical Center Corporation. I'm a retired banker, many years ago, thank God.
Greg Wright, Olmsted County Commissioner.
Michael Wojak, citizen of Rochester.
Harry Hoffman, citizen of Rochester, native of Rochester, and treasurer and chief investment officer of Mayo Clinic.
Dana Bailey, director of the Destination Medical Center Corporation Board.
Ken Brown, Olmsted County Board.
Patrick Keene, newly elected Rochester City Council and retired from IBM.
Mark Dine, Olmsted County Commissioner.
Annalisa Donson, City Council member.
Matt Flynn, County Board.
Patrick C. with Destination Medical Center EDA.
Sean Palmer, City of Rochester, City Council.
Paul Williams, DMC board member and director of an affordable housing development organization called Project for Pride in Living.
Jocelyn Raymundo, founder and CEO of Rochester Home Infusion.
Mark Bilderback, Rochester City Council, lifelong resident and retired from Mayo.
Stephanie Podolki, Olmsted County Board.
Mike Doherty, DMC Director and the Mayo Rep on the DMC Board.
Pam Wheelock, DMC EDA Board Member, currently with Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, with a lot of diversity in my work prior to that.
Nick Campion, Rochester City Council and DMCC Board Member.
Kathleen Lamb, General Counsel for the DMCC.
Heidi Welsh, Olmsted County Administrator.
Good afternoon, Steve Reimer, Rochester City Administrator.
Lisa Clark with DMC EDA Executive Director.
Jeff Bolton, DMC EDA Board Chair.
Randy Staver, City Council President for Rochester.
So what we want to do now, that was actually kind of impressive. Give yourselves a round of applause. That was really good. What we want to do now is to have each of our public partners update on where we are at right now. Give us a kind of grounding. And this is a grounding for our conversation. So we'll ask them to, starting with Lisa Clark, to talk a bit about the progress that we've made and begin this whole process of giving us the framework for our conversation.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. To have all of these people in one room, it's pretty amazing. We're going to have to make sure we capture this forever. We're going to just, myself, my colleagues Steve and Heidi are just going to give, we're going to set the stage, not necessarily about progress, but more importantly right now about what our goals are in each of our organizations so that it's a stage setter. So if you don't mind, we will take any questions that you have during our discussion portion so we can move right into the discussion. So I just wanted to start in terms of helping people understand the DMC goals. You had a packet that was sent to all of you with the pre-read materials. So that had everything from the history of DMC and how it was built and how the organizations function and who's in charge of the money and how does it flow. So all of that is in your packets, and I hope you had time to read those. But one thing I wanted to note is that over the last few years, our colleagues, all of us, have been reminding people about why we did DMC in the first place. Because sometimes it gets pretty easy to get caught up in square footage and costs and trains and planes and automobiles, and we forget about why we did DMC in the first place. So just a quick reminder is that there was a challenge in front of us. Rochester was not meeting the patient or visitor or resident expectations. We did a lot of research on the front end. We learned also that Mayo Clinic is willing to make Rochester its global destination medical center by investing billions of dollars in the Rochester community, which is exciting. And then we found quickly after some research that we have a public financing gap. With that type of investment of $5 to $6 billion, we lacked the capacity and we needed to move forward. So we found ourselves in an interesting place. At the bottom of this chart, you'll see that we put a strategic plan together and we decided, one, you can either let the market approach continue, and we actually believe that we are operating from a position of strength, but sometimes that can turn into not strength after a while, or we can deliberately engage in a DMC initiative where we will be strategic about our planning and strategic about our investment, and you're all here so you know where we landed on that one. We decided to go for DMC. This was our quick journey. Some of you were along for the ride on the journey, and some of you are just learning about what the journey was. But the early years, about a year and a half or 2 years, excuse me, we did quite a bit of research, quantitative, qualitative research to identify the gaps. And that's when we came out of the chute with what DMC could become. We went to the legislative phase in 2013. The legislature gave us the nod for $585 million of public investment to support this $5 to $6 billion initiative in Rochester, serving the community, and of course, serving the state of Minnesota. It is a state initiative. We created the development plan. This was a gritty process. I'm so glad we took the front end the first year or so to really do it right. So we actually had to put governance structures in place, boards, 2 different boards, how the dollars flow, what the approval process looks like. We worked with our city colleagues, our county colleagues, to make sure that we develop the process on the front end that we are using today to make sure these projects come out of the chute the right way and are vetted correctly and using criteria. So we did that, and at the same time we developed the development plan itself, which is a finance plan, a marketing plan, a development plan over a 20-year time span. And every 5 years, just to remind all of you, we need to revise that plan so that it catches up with the market and make sure that we're on track. And we will be doing that next year. So we're at year 4.5 right now and moving to year 5. Time flies. And we're now happily into the implementation phase, which we'll be talking about today. DMC priorities are 3. Create a catalyst, which is heart of the city. That's where hospitality meets healthcare. That's a very critical component of DMC, sort of the generator in terms of where jobs come together, along with the activity of Mayo Clinic. Our priority 2 is what we call Discovery Square. It's driving investment in the biomedical technology sector. So that's where we are driving new businesses and new jobs. I believe Discovery Square is the economic generator for DMC. And our third priority, which we spent plenty of time on today and past months and years, was transportation, and we're very happy about the progress that we've been making on that front. The final few slides I just wanted to note is this is how the $585 million of public investment is divided. I think you're probably all quite familiar with that. It is in your packets as well. And then this is an actual forecasted investment 2015 to 2019. So far of those public dollars, we've spent $94 million, and this is a breakout in terms of how those dollars have been spent. And you'll see in the next slide sort of how we're shifting in terms of the trend of how we're using our public dollars and where they'll be going. The phase 2 of Discovery of DMC plan actually is focusing quite a bit on transportation, so you'll see that part of the pie change as we project our phase 2. Between 2020 and 2024, we believe we could be using about $145 million of public investment, and that chart looks a little bit different than it did the first 5 years. As you'll see, transportation arm is growing, public realm is growing a bit, and then you'll see the to be determined section is really a lot of what we'll be talking about today. How will we allocate these dollars, and what kind of trends are we seeing in terms of shifting our allocation? So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Mr. Steve Reimer, our City Administrator, to talk about the city's goals.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. I think I can speak for all four of us sitting here, having all the bodies together at one time to really talk about DMC, talk about the Rochester community, Olmsted County is really great, and we do appreciate it. And hopefully this is not the only time we come together like this, but this is the start of a new practice to make sure that we're all moving forward in the same manner at all times. What I want to talk about is really looking back at 2018 for the city. And 2018 was very much a foundational and a strategic year for the city and the city council. What you have in front of you are just a few of the key things. The first thing is the council adopted our new comprehensive plan, and I think appropriate name, Planning to Succeed, is the name of the document. And it really shapes who we want to be into the future. In the packet, you can see our community vision statement is in there. And please take note of the things like you heard earlier at the DMC meeting. It's about the people. It's about how we want to be viewed and how we want to be as a community. You'll see words like caring and health and wellness and being sustainable, being innovative. And those are all key things, and I think they very much align with what we're trying to accomplish here with the DMC component of our community. So that was one of the first pieces. And then the second piece was the council went through an extensive process last year that really started once again with the community, with the team that works for the city to talk about where are we heading. And we have the strategic priorities and foundational principles in front of you. And this is a result of the council working through that process and once again really looking into the future of who do we want to be, how are we going to get there, what are the things that are important to us. And through the conversation, we started just talking about strategic priorities. But the council really felt that the foundational principles were something that they wanted to draw out and call out to all of you as well as those that live and work here. And to talk about the compassion and the different ways that we're going to be sustainable, why social equity is so important as we move forward, and the safety of our community. And all of that comes in different shapes and sizes. But it's all helped us have that compass, if you will, for the city of how we want to move it forward, how we're going to align our resources, and as importantly, how we're going to work collaboratively with all of you around this table, as well as others within this community, the region, and the state, and how we get there. I'd be happy to go into any detail at any time as it goes through, but I just wanted to give you that high-level overview of where the city is at today. So thank you.
Steve, could I just mention, and I think it's important with this group, how much progress has been made since you took over, and I just think it's been an enormously important evolution in all of this work. And I just want to specifically call you out and let people know how much we appreciate that, because it's been a significant pivot in a positive way. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm just one of many, so
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Heidi Walsh, the Administrator at Olmsted County. And what you have in front of you here is a slide with our mission and organizational vision and our goals. You'll see, and many of you know, that county government is broad and encompasses many areas that are a little bit different, more focused on human services and health than our city partners. So our main goals, what all of our work goes towards, is safe and healthy communities, being good stewards of our built and natural environments, maintaining foundations of democracy, and then being really operationally excellent. We have many, many priorities particularly within that health and housing and human services area. So I just have a few things to highlight for you. In that area, and I should say that I think it's important to say that when you think about how we work together around the DMC, a lot of the county focus is on how are we going to support all of those people and all of the needs around criminal justice, around public assistance, around social services. So that's a little bit of a different topic, I think, than you normally are talking about with infrastructure. But I think it's important that you know that we are very cognizant and always thinking about how do we plan well to be good partners in those areas around DMC growth. So just a couple other highlights of specific priorities that the county is focused on right now. First of all, launching a master plan to transform Graham Park to a regional asset. Updating transportation and land use plans. Implementing a pretrial release evaluation system so that this goes more to those supports for the system, for the community as we see population growth. We are hoping to push forward on a mental health crisis center this year. We are advancing space planning for the justice system needs. And finally, we're working in partnership with the city, to increase the 2020 absentee voting location. So that just gives you a little bit of a flavor of the breadth of the kinds of priorities that the county undertakes this year.
Heidi, could I just underscore that the action we took today to do the South Transit Hub was directly influenced by the county saying to us, this is not in the Destination Medical Center area. This is an area we as the county care about. And I think then Chair Cascaden made that point, as current Chair Beer has made. But our action today was very reflective of our view to engage the county more deeply and partner with you on issues like affordable housing. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knew we were connecting those dots. Okay, so at this point then, what we want to do is move to the future direction, and I think Patrick Sieb, do I introduce you now? Yep. So Patrick's going to facilitate this conversation as we talk about how do we move to our future direction.
Yeah, so thank you. On the screen are the objectives of today's session. I don't know, I wasn't in the room when you called the meeting to order, Mayor Rybak.
It was riveting.
Pardon me?
It was very.
Did you talk
really
about this?
exciting.
Did you actually address these?
I just generally talked about it.
So maybe a question I'll put on the table. Did anybody come here with any other expectation than what's on the screen? Because that flight is leaving at a different time and from a different gate. So really what I want to underscore is this is an effort not to tell the county what to do or not to tell the city what to do or not for you to tell DMCC what to do, but it is an effort for, as DMCC is preparing for phase 2, and by law, Kathleen mentioned earlier, we are to submit an updated development plan in 2020 on our 5-year anniversary that foreshadows, or rather that says where we're headed and the work that we're going to be doing. So much of 2020, the work of the DMCC board is really to prepare for that. And think of this as one data point, one significant data point in that process. Starting out their thinking by inviting the local policymakers and leaders from related organizations to give their insight, share their insight, to assimilate that and synthesize that as we prepare that second phase development plan. So those are the objectives, and I hope you were taking notes when Steve and Heidi and Lisa were presenting, because you actually are going to be tested on those things. So you'll see that in just a moment. So at this time, I want to introduce two other folks who are going to join me in helping to facilitate this session. So first of all, Kevin Shaw, who is with the Knowledge and Evaluation Research Unit at Mayo, and he is our scribe. And it's a bit of performance art, so maybe just to give you an idea. So Kevin, who apparently will do it from the floor, is scribing our meeting, documenting our meeting, and illustrating it. So it's a bit of performance art, but it's a way of capturing this conversation in a way that we think will be quite meaningful. So Kevin is behind the white paper there, so that's Kevin. And then Tracy Vetting-Wolf, who is with the Kern Center for Innovation and Design.
Yep.
Design and Innovation?
Innovation and Design.
Innovation and Design. Tracy is an architect by training and spent much of her career in experience design. As you all know, the work that any of us are doing is really should be focused on the ultimate experience that we're generating for our customers, our clients, and for our communities. So Tracy is going to co-facilitate this portion with me. And we have a set of questions. We asked all of you in preparation for this meeting, we asked all of you to help us in organizing and developing this meeting. So what you'll see coming is really a reflection of our best effort to translate what we heard from all of you as individuals and organizations into a meaningful discussion. So we have some tools to do that. Tracy, I'm going to just turn to you and ask you to...
So we have a lot of people here, 28 people. We want to elicit as much of your advice and insight and expertise as possible. So we have two mechanisms to help facilitate this collaboration and this conversation. The first one you'll see is a polling device. Everybody has something at their seat with a blinking light on it. So we're going to try that out.
Looks like a BlackBerry.
Yeah, it does.
Sure does. I still miss it.
So you can start messaging each other. No, not really. We're going to do a trial question right now and do a little bit of a warm-up. You're going to answer the question, how did you get here today? Pick 1, 2, 3, or 4 and enter it on your polling device. And as you can see, when the polling is open, it's lit up and it's ready to receive your answer. And as soon as you push something in, you've submitted it. You can cancel it and select a different answer if you wish up until polling is closed. We're going to be looking for a total of 28 coming in before we close the polling. We want to get an answer from everybody if possible. And then, are we at 28? All right, so now we're going to view our results. A lot of people came here by car and a few under duress. None by bike. Whichever way you got here today, we are really very happy you're here.
Michael, did you not press the right button?
I'm still cold from last night, thank you very much.
Anyways, whichever way you got here today, thank you very much for being here. Now, typically what we'll do after a polling question is we'll open it up to invite you to explain your rationale, and this is where more of the insightful conversation will come. We collect the polling by anonymous, but we do want to use that as fodder for insightful conversation. Why did you vote the way that you did? The second mechanism that we have is we have question cards at each of your seat. And those question cards will have a question up on the presentation to help us guide through. But what we want you to do with the question cards is to take notes. I'll be inviting you to do a moment of reflection after we read a question. And we want you to have kind of your perspective. What is your individual answer at first? And then we'll open up to conversation and then start comparing and seeing how different people answered it maybe differently. So with that, we can go right into the first question and go ahead and get your first question card out. We know that Rochester is not an island. We're under a number of different forces in the world. Whether it be technology, new technologies, economic forces in a global economy, different policies, public policies, state and federal level. And we're wondering, from your perspective, what is a transformative trend that you're facing in your particular expert arena that DMC should consider when thinking about its future work? So for instance, as an experienced designer, I know there's a transformative trend around frontline customer service and doing real-time troubleshooting. And that's something that, in my area I would be looking at. What's something in your area that is a trend that could be potentially transformative from your perspective? Take a few moments to write something down on your sheet.
It's not clear this is not a keyboard question. This is a
right.
handwritten.
right, to kick it off, I think what this, in the same spirit as what we did introductions, if we can do a crisp round robin of what is something that you have written down on your sheet of paper. And
You don't get to explain it, just say it.
yeah, you get to say it.
Just say it.
And then we'll open it up, talk about some of the more pressing ones.
So just say it, and if you don't have anything written down, just say pass.
Lack of skilled employees in the trades.
Need for affordable housing in the region.
How to really brand Rochester's future and now destination for entrepreneurs?
Wayfinding.
Well, mine is a little more pedestrian. If you expect people to walk to work, especially through the Kutzke Park area, I think we need to rethink about the responsibility of snow removal, keep those sidewalks safe.
Snow removal, got it.
Great.
Here, here.
Healthy living.
Workforce availability, training, and affordable housing.
Mobility in the workplace.
Keep looking out over the horizon.
New types of affordable housing solutions.
I didn't realize I was participating.
He's got his mouth full. Then I get two. Managing growth.
Robotic navigators and concierge services.
Inclusiveness of other communities and regional partners.
Common ground, especially places like Discovery Walk, part of the city and the alley.
All workforce development.
In the area of transportation and healthy living, I put people first priority, not vehicles.
Changing demographics, specifically diversity and aging of the population, our workforce shortage, particularly the service sector and healthcare, and affordable housing.
That sounded like three.
That was three.
Sounded like three.
Pick one.
That's good.
Didn't you understand the instruction?
You have a question about that?
The impact of the delivery of healthcare from remote locations using undeveloped technology.
How do you use undeveloped technology if it's not developed? I just question. Establish RCTC as a 2+2 state university to fulfill the needs of DMC in the future.
Working families in poverty.
Globalization as both an opportunity and a threat.
IT modernization and optimization and how we use it.
Regional transit.
Demographic value shifts.
Are we creating too many service jobs that pay at a level that won't allow you to live in the community?
Workforce development retention.
Transportation.
Great, so I'm gonna, there are several obvious things that came up. We heard a lot about affordable housing. We heard a lot about workforce. I'd like to spend a moment on each one of those and specifically ask for some discussion about where DMC should be involved in either of those two issues. So not necessarily your enterprise or your organization, but where, given what you know about DMC, should it be involved in those two issues? Workforce and affordable housing, I'm sorry. Who wants to?
Well, I mean, I'll say something. So as we think about housing, and we know there are developments downtown looking for more mixed use in those developments rather than having them all be high-end, which is a little bit what's happening.
On housing, on affordable housing, I think DMC can contribute to, act as a catalyst to bring more businesses in the community into the fold to help recognize, realize, and contribute to the affordable housing need, help supplement those dollars.
Who else wants to say something about affordable housing? Mike?
DMC has the ability to set the standard for developments within the district to ensure the combination of housing affordability, but also the basic wage and benefit contributions to ensure the foundational folks that build our community have the means to survive in our community.
So I heard a connection between affordability and workforce and income. Anybody want to talk about the workforce piece of the?
Can I just stay on affordable housing?
You have no liberty at any point.
No, it's okay. But affordable housing means many things to many people. And what the DMC needs is the local community to map, gap, enroll, meaning identify which piece of the continuum from homelessness up to first housing, where are the gaps and where do you need help? We don't have the capacity to do that map. You guys do. But we do have capacity to do things like today, saying let's use our transportation infrastructure to create a platform for affordable housing. So we also, I don't think, have the philanthropic ecosystem here that I'm used to in the cities and where someone like Paul Williams' organization operates. So I think we have to work together on developing that.
Could I jump into that conversation? I think there's a lot of confusion about the role of DMC in community planning overall.
Right.
And our city and our county have struggled with our planning functions, and we're still having discussions about planning functions. But without wanting to offend anyone, the dominance of DMC for the DMC zone in planning has created additional confusion about who's responsible for what. And I would say that it makes me a little nervous. I'm more probably attuned with Ken Brown's thinking, is that the DMC has a role, but we're not looking to you to lead in affordable housing. We're looking for you to contribute to community-wide solutions. And we need to partner with the city, we need to partner with our business community. So there's not, government isn't going to solve the affordable housing situation. And Paul Williams certainly heard me talk long and hard last year in a group of 28 about the importance of engaging the private sector in solving our housing issues, because it is an employer's problem as much as it is a community's problem. It is an employer's problem as much as it is an individual. It's not about individuals. It's about how, if you're going to have a vital community, then you have to have a variety of housing available at different price points for different kinds of situations. And the aging and the demographics are part of that. So I don't want us to leave today with the sense that the DMC board or the DMC EDA thinks that they're in charge of responding or solving the affordable housing. But the question is, you've got at least two people that I know really well who know a lot about affordable housing. What is the proper role for the DMC within your zone for helping to be that catalyst for private sector investment and for arriving at a community consensus about our targets and our goals? And we keep coming to the edge of the DMC all the time and not knowing how to really engage productively.
So I'm going to pivot for a second to one other thing I heard during and we'll certainly come back to that. One other thing I heard going around the room was said in different ways, which had to do with the influence of technology and how
Patrick,
that
just because that was a really good moment, can I be rude enough to just, I think we need to bring somebody else like Paul or Jim Campbell or some of these others who've been involved in it, because I think we're at a moment where we can decide something, because we want to be aggressive, but we're not in charge of leading that. Is that a consistent?
I totally agree with what Commissioner Cascaden said. And I have to agree with her. She was my coach on the Governor's Housing Task Force, and we spent quality time, and I figured out quickly that it's best to agree with Cascaden. But I think she's nailed it right on the head, and as had several folks who talked about that the solution to affordable housing is a multifaceted, it's a systemic issue, and this notion that if we just get a couple projects built, it'll be solved. I just don't think that's the case, and as former Mayor Rybak talked about, it is also a wide variety of projects. So it's not just very low-income housing, although we clearly know that's where the biggest gap is. It's also workforce housing. And so I think what we talked about today in terms of the mobility Hubs is a great opportunity, perhaps for some workforce housing. As Sheila suggested, how we get the private sector to tackle more of that is absolutely the space that we can be in. And I think the DMC's role as a catalyst, as a partner, not as a leader on that, because ultimately the city and the county with its services related to folks in housing, those are and the state in terms of providing the financing to get anything built. That really is where the longer-term solution lies, not in the DMC coming up with a piece of money.
The next to workforce is that if you got housing that they can afford, you will attract the workforce to come to your area. If they can't afford to live here, they won't come.
The workforce that the doctors and the high-end workforce, I think, will take care of itself. But if we want those people, we got to have the trades. We got to have a car mechanic that can work on your brakes. There's, I don't know what the number is, but it's probably like 20 support people, things that they do in the community. And those are the people that we got to focus on the housing for. The workforce, right now, they're getting priced out. The high end, I think, will kind of wash itself out. But if we want to attract the workforce, the people that, like I say, work on brakes, your carpenters, your plumbers, those type of people, we've got to encourage them to be in the trades and do that type of work. And part of that is having an affordable place that they can call home. And I think that's the nut we got to crack.
So I just want to comment in terms of not what DMC shouldn't do, but in terms of what DMC should do. I think we have to acknowledge that in a lot of the conversations that take place in terms of private-public relationships, DMC is going to be the tip of the spear because that's what we funded them to do. That's important work they do out marketing and having those connections. So one of the things I see is familiarity with the message of the city so that early on in these projects' genesis, we can be talking about affordable housing instead of waiting and trying to tack it on at the very end to a project that's pro forma may not support it. If we're leading with, hey, this is a great project and day one, meeting one, we also need to figure out if we can work affordable into this, that can be a really catalytic change to how we've done this process historically. A lot of times TIF proposals or affordable housing comes towards the end of a product setup. If we can instead be talking about it at day one, I think that's a huge shift and something that mentally, if we enable staff, if we support that as a message, and the city and county can get their kind of message dovetailed, then all of a sudden we have a really powerful kind of process to generate new things.
Can I make a suggestion then? Because I think we still haven't figured out exactly how we don't lead, but we're aggressive. So what if we built into the next 4 meetings as a trial an update on affordable housing from the city and the county on overall what's going on, the best map you can give us, and the best idea of what's moving that we can put wind in the sails on. I mean, if we just had that moment in the meeting.
I concur with everything that my peers are saying here, the complexity of the challenge and the difficulty in defining what DMC's role is. I would specifically say as an organization, DMC should, at a minimum, look not to make the situation that we have worse, ensuring that the jobs are created are matched with housing affordability. And it's important to remember not only on the front end to have that the conversation about what can be built and affordable, which is very hard to do, but also have that conversation about what kind of community benefits agreements are we going to tie to the subsidies that we provide that ensure these jobs we are creating are living wage jobs and not poverty jobs. We can't separate the income side from the affordable housing side. This is a room full of a lot of really smart people who have a lot of ideas on this. I took the time, I put some thoughts in a memo that I'm going to distribute to my colleagues after the meeting, but the reality is that we need real data. We need real results. I appreciate the check-ins, but I've got a lot of folks who just want to pay rent right now, and we're not there right now.
So where do we leave it? I mean, I want to create a space where the city and the county and the local community can come to us each meeting and tell us what's going on with affordable housing, where it's going. Because otherwise, we're just going to say, okay, it's not our job. We're going to sit back and do nothing. And I don't think any of us want that.
I think a shared resolution would be really important. So one of the things that we talked about is needing to dovetail the two policies. I'm sorry to jump in there. Dovetail the two policies. I think that's a concrete step the county and the city can take is let's combine the policies and come with one policy instead of two separate policies. And I think enabling our staffs to come back and say, here's where they line up, what can we fix is a really important step.
I would say that over the last 3 or 4 years, I was saying to Steve that the DMC board in some respects has been put together to create an environment that attracted capital to this community. I mean, bottom line,
Yeah.
we want to get private capital to come here to do exciting development projects, and we're accomplishing that. Many of us have been approached by affordable housing people the last couple of years, and candidly, I'm lost. I don't know what everyone's role and responsibility really is. If somebody could, between now and the next meeting, put together a schematic of, and I agree that it's the county and city that they're here, they're the ones that should really lead on this, but there's a role for us to play in attracting capital to help make this happen. And so if somebody could just give me a picture of who's doing what, that would be very helpful.
Patrick, I'm sorry,
I agree with everything that has been said, and I think we don't need to overstate in terms of the challenges when it comes to affordable housing. I think it's really time to really quantify where that is.
Right.
Just like what Chair Rybak has said, there's a continuum, and we need to be smart in actually understanding where are the holes. Before we actually quantify where the holes are, it's almost kind of a bit premature trying to say who's responsible for these. Until we get those facts, if somehow the county can produce a study where we can actually have a better understanding where the holes are, then that's when we can formulate a potential solution and how we can all put our heads together and coming up what would be beneficial for our community.
Steve and Heidi, I think both.
Mr. Chair, right now, the county and the city are working together on something we're calling a housing scorecard. I think that may be a tool that speaks exactly to what many of you have alluded to.
The other piece that happened about a year ago now was the coalition was formed. The coalition was formed with the leadership of Mayo, the foundation, the county, Dave is here today, the city and others that have come together. So that is probably another good spot or piece of information we get in front of this group, the DMC, but really for everyone, so we can start embracing it together. And one of the things that's been talked about is whose roles, whose responsibilities, and then where the gap.
So let's just, could we just put a bow around this, that we'll create a spot in the next 4 meetings for the coalition. You guys make the choice, but come to us and aggressively push us where you want to go. You're leading, we want a partner, and we don't want to be a passive partner. Okay, sorry, you guys, thanks for facilitating. Sorry to steal it from you. We got something done here.
I'm just eye candy for the meeting. So we have like 8 spectacular questions, so that was the first one. And before I finish this first one, I think it's not surprising that affordable housing and workforce came up in this conversation. But I also heard something else that I think is important for us to talk about, and I heard it from several different places around the table and different ways of saying it. But I heard about the impact of technology and the changes to potentially medical care delivery, and how that will change the world around us. And I wonder if anybody who made a comment referring to that would be willing to say what were they thinking, what were you thinking, and how might that impact our thinking as we're going forward? Because remember, Mayor Rybak, you sort of challenged us as we developed these questions to talk about what's the new context as we think about our work going forward. So there was a context that created and gave birth to DMC. There's a new context, affordable housing as an example. On technology, so anybody who talked about technology or the impact of robotics, medical care delivery, care to comment about that and how that might affect our thinking? Yeah.
So I'll start. So I indicated robotics, I think, is going to become a greater part of delivery both of healthcare services. I mean, we do probably more robotic surgery on the Rochester campus than anywhere. But also, we're seeing developments in terms of patient interface with robotics as part of the service delivery model. And so again, I just see that as an important element as we think about the development of the downtown area supporting care. And then I think, Jim, I'll just build a little bit on what you said, because remote care will also be a significant part of our delivery model. where we're providing services electronically, diagnostic and therapeutic services. We've got an entire group that's focused on connected care. And in one way, it will reduce the number of visits from people from all over the world. But in another way, it'll actually expand the impact of Mayo Clinic, and we believe ultimately will result in greater demand for patients that really need the capabilities that a Mayo Clinic has. So again, if we're successful, we will see more serious and more complex patients coming into the city, and we've got to think about how we accommodate them, both Mayo Clinic and our hospitality partners. So again, there's a lot of technology. One of our business strategies that we're looking at, new model, business model, is Mayo Clinic as a platform. And so again, we see that as strengthening and complementing our core business, which is seeing patients, but also then the delivery of services as a platform business.
So I just don't want us to put our head in the sand and not believe that there's going to be some revolutionary technology out in front of us that's going to impact the model that we are focused on today. And I mean, think about, what Amazon is and what it means to all of us. 10 or 15 years ago, we didn't even know what it was. And there was a woman that dropped out of Stanford that developed a blood test and created an $8 billion company, and now it's bankrupt. But that technology of picking your finger and putting it on your cell phone is going to somehow, provide things that people don't have to come to Rochester for. And in the case of United Health, they've got thousands of employees that don't come to the office every day. They work from home. And, those kind of things we just cannot ignore.
One of the things that this really underscores is the word destination and destination medical center. There's more discretion for people to come or not. One of the things that I don't think we're moving fast enough on is the idea of packaging the amenities that we have here. We focused a bit on Rochester itself, and the reason I get really into the public space and the common ground and this idea of the alley connecting the castle and 3rd Avenue, all that stuff isn't small. That's about the destination. But the place where I think we're really falling down is we are thinking of Rochester as Rochester itself. When you go to San Francisco, you think about going to the wine country. Okay, when you think about the Eagle Center in Wabasha, and you think about all up and down the river, and you think that you have this amazing place called Minneapolis-St. Paul nearby, that's not competitive to the destination. That's complementary to. And the entire, region that we're in, Lanesboro, I mean, we don't package any of that well at all right now. And I don't know how all of this fits in it, but I've had one-off conversations with people in all those places, and I don't know how we're doing that, but I think we're falling down on the destination part of Destination Medical Center, up to and including having something going on in the chateau every night.
RT, can I, 3.5 months ago, Economist polled and interviewed the 28 leading, according to them, AI experts in the world. About a third of them were in China. And the bottom line that came out of that is that AI is going to replace 40% of the current workforce by the year 2030. So you stop and think about that. What does that take? First of all, who do they replace? Fast food restaurants would be all robots. You go on and go on, and they would use several examples as you go down the line. So I would hope that somewhere we would take that into consideration about what we build, for how long, how much, and also be prepared to retrain, to have facilities to retrain these people, because they're going to have to eat, and they're going to have to sleep, and they're not going to have jobs. That's just not gonna affect here, but that's gonna affect all over. And the answer to my first question was along that line. I think it's gonna be a real issue that we should be aware of as we go along. I don't know what the answer is, but many people think this is the way the world's going.
Well, one of the things is a faster feedback loop on what jobs are being created and connecting that to higher ed and into high schools. And I just think we can do a better job. Workforce, we didn't answer that earlier one, or who's in charge, but this idea of creating the Discovery District, where the university is doing the work, what's happening with the community college, all of that. But we're going to have to be retraining and retraining and retraining, because the good news is while we're losing jobs, we're also having a smaller workforce, and the workforce isn't lined up yet to the jobs that are being created in real time. And I just think that's a place where we're going to have a tighter connection with our unions, with our colleges, and our high schools.
I think we're going to try to move on. I don't know that we can put a bow on this one.
Two things that I heard was that having shared information and aligned policies would be something very fruitful on any of these topics that were brought up. So whether it be affordable housing or workforce or retraining, it sounds like there's really opportunity for sharing information and aligning policies. We're going to move on to question number 3. We're going to skip to question number 3. And for this one, we want you to recognize that now 5 years into DMC, we have a new context, and we're looking to reframe the vision based on this context rather than the one 5 years ago. And so we're wondering, what changes have you noticed in Rochester? And that being the new context, what are the different changes that you've seen? And how should this new context influence our thinking about the next phase of the DMC initiative? So take a moment to reflect and write a thought down on your question card, and in a few seconds we'll open up for discussion.
Those of you who were at the earlier meeting of DMCC where Dr. Ferrugia, the new president and CEO of Mayo, spoke, he started by saying, of course, he spent 30 years in Rochester before becoming CEO of Mayo Jacksonville, and he talked about coming back here after being gone for some period of time and the change that he's noticed. So he has the advantage of having stepped away and come back. For many people in this room, you live it every day. So try to think about that distinction between if you had just come back after being gone for 5 years. And so I might pick on a few people to comment. So, but I'm willing to see if anybody wants to raise their hand first. Jeff?
So you can look at buildings and things like that, but what I see that's different is really what Will Mayo refer to as the union of forces, which is necessary to solve complex problems. If you think about the state, the county, the city, business community coming together, creating a common vision, and working really hand in hand to seize opportunities as well as solve problems.
Union of Forces, Commissioner?
The amount of outside investment and interest in Rochester.
Amount of outside interest, great.
IBM.
What do you want to say about that?
It's different in 5 years.
Okay.
Significantly.
Okay. For everybody's benefit, IBM sold its campus, and it's being retooled. While they have a smaller presence than they had at one time, it's being retooled and home to other companies like Myriad that Dr. Ferrugia mentioned earlier. So thank you, Mike. Mayor?
Go ahead, Sue.
Yeah.
I think our marketplace, we have a lot of growth, but our marketplace has just changed. I mean, and we're subject to some of the same trends where we're seeing change in retail. We're seeing changes in the food production that used to be part of our mainstay. And at the same time then with the DMC investment, we're seeing kind of a excitement around our downtown, and we have many more choices for entertainment and cultural activities than we had 5 years ago. But our marketplace has not diversified. In fact, it's kind of getting narrower, which makes us even more vulnerable.
Okay.
I think there are a lot of things that have happened, but the biggest difference is, I think, sort of the psychology of the place. I was raised by a mother who came here and thought this was one of the greatest cities in the world. So I always had this big vision of Rochester, and I don't frankly think Rochester writ large always believed that in this community. And I think the early success of Destination Medical Center and a lot of other things has helped this community see that it has the potential to be one of the truly great communities in the country. And I don't mean that to be putting down the city. I have wanted the city to understand how great it is, and I think that's starting to be seen more and more here.
I was gonna say the young people are excited, and I think that's like a really dramatic shift. I see young people that see opportunity to get more involved in the community, whether that's entrepreneurially or if that's as like an artistic opportunity, but just young people that are engaged and excited versus kind of feeling like they're here for a job. Like there's more opportunity, there's more to be excited about.
So let's pause on those, and I captured 5, and I may have, if I misstate what was said, I want to then talk about if these are the 5, and of course these aren't the only 5, but if these are the 5 big changes that are really creating a new context, what should that make us think about? How does that position us differently? So union of forces, so there's an alignment of talent and resources and organizations, a psychology about the place. New capital investment that's coming into the marketplace that hadn't considered Rochester in the past. This issue around diversification or lack thereof of the economy in the market. And young people who are now 5 years older than they were when this started are excited. The rest of us have pretty much stayed the same age. So those 5 things being new context, and of course there's more, but how would those 5 things affect, or should that affect, our thinking as we imagine the next phase of the work of DMC?
Well, I'd like to add something, though. I don't disagree with the 5 things that have been mentioned, but I think that RT talked about the psychology, and I do think that there's an element within the community that would be in established neighborhoods, the people that believe that they worked and built Mayo Clinic, and I think that there is more than a perception, but a reality that they feel left out of this process, and that the focus is not on the neighborhoods where they live and including them in this process, but focusing on a 12-block area that they feel totally left out of. And in order for us to be the great community, RT, that you talked about, I don't think that we can leave these people behind, and I do think that we have to do something to help them understand the process and how they're going to benefit from this. Because right now, they see their taxes going to something that they say, whoa, wait a minute. I don't see how I'm going to benefit from this. So.
Well, I think this is a really important question because, I'm enough of a washed-up politician to understand that the dynamic here is one where there needs to be a lot of work to get a lot more of the community on board. We're charged with a very small piece of geography, and yet we have to be mindful of those of you at a local level what you need to do. And one of the special parts of this, speaking as somebody whose wife grew up here in a neighborhood near downtown, and I've got family living here, I get that piece a lot. But that can't be pushed back on us, okay? We get it, but our job is this, and we just took an action that was about this, which is an acknowledgement of that. I also believe when we talk about what's happening downtown, we have to be mindful that this is just about visitors. All of this work we're trying to do with trying to get people coming downtown and stuff is about the whole community. But that's a tough one for us because that's not our responsibility. We want to help, but what do you think we should do? No, I mean, really, help us, guide us. How do we address that from the spot we sit in?
Well, I think we've talked about pieces of all this stuff, but part of it is that when we talk about transportation, we're talking about a localized area, but people around the county and around the city still need to have transportation. They still need to get to places, and even though that might not be your focus, it is bringing the people along with us to make it work.
And know that we get that, but also know that the tools at our disposal are about a piece of geography. We just took an action that says we want to go outside of those borders, and we have to understand whether we even have the authority to do that. So we're willing to do that. The only reason I'm getting animated on this is that I'm super frustrated on this thing, want to get at it, but do not turn to us to solve the regional transportation issue. We can't do that.
If I could, I think the discussion recently of mobility hubs and so forth is a great example. I would agree with Mr. Wright. We hear that refrain all too often that DMC is just about downtown, it's just about Mayo Clinic. I think as we look at some of the regional transportation and how do we effectively move people not only within Rochester, but into and out of Rochester. And I think the support we've received from DMCC to accentuate those goals is an example of how we begin to answer some of those questions. It's not just about, we understand the ripple effect of what DMC is doing outward into the community and the rural areas and so forth, but I think we are stepping up and addressing that as we talk about transportation, certainly, and even as we talk about more global topics of housing, affordable or workforce, and so forth.
Just relatively new within the last year to the DMC board, and I may have a slightly different take on this. I came down early on in my tenure and spent a day talking with folks in the Rochester community, most of whom aren't part of this table and aren't part of these conversations, and purposefully did that, and I was struck at this same notion of folks feeling left out. And I think the reality is it's a two-way street, obviously, where we need to better get a sense of what the community expects. But the fact of the matter is, what is the tagline for DMC? DMC everywhere? And I think DMC is the shining civic initiative in this community right now, and has been for some time. And therefore, I do think DMC has a responsibility to figure out how we go about our work in tackling some of these other, or helping the community to tackle some of these other issues. We went to Chamber of Commerce inner-city leadership visit. We recently went to Nashville. And we heard the same thing, right, in Nashville, right, where the regular folks who been in the community for a long time, who built Nashville, are like, I don't recognize this place. It's Disneyland down there on Broadway, if you've been down to the main music strip in Nashville. Literally, they call it Disneyland. And it's like they've built this machine down there, and I don't feel like there's anything there for me. So I do think DMC has a role to play in helping the community. I'm really, actually really impressed with the work that's going on around housing with the Community Foundation. I think the building of the Community Foundation as a long-term civic problem-solving, independent of government, independent of Mayo, is one of the greatest things that could happen in this community. In the Twin Cities, our team mentioned earlier, he heads the Minneapolis Foundation. We have the St. Paul Foundation. We have community problem-solving entities, and man, we got a lot of community problems to deal with, and we're far from solved, trust me. But those independent civic institutions, I think, are part of the solution here. So from my perspective on the DMC public board, I think we do have a role to play in figuring out how we help the community, how we ensure that this wonderful development opportunity has other impacts and other benefits and helps the community to tackle some of these other bigger issues.
I agree a lot with Paul. I agree wholeheartedly with what you say. And the thing that I want to impress upon people is it is a two-way street. You can't just sit back and carp and complain. You know, we're leading the horse to water. If you've got some input, I think we've done a great job in this community. You can always do better of trying to get input from the people that live here. And, you know, what the local people here want that built Rochester. But they have to come to us. They can't, if you just sit back and you know, throw peanuts from the peanut gallery, that's not productive. Come to some of these meetings. Let us know. You may not get everything, but you gotta, it's a two-way street, and we gotta go both ways.
Michael?
I want to respectfully disagree and respond to that from the standpoint that, as I said at this table, I am incredibly privileged to be here, as is everyone who is here. There's been a long-term mentality that those folks need come to us, not necessarily recognizing that we host our meetings in locations or at times that are inaccessible to them, that they're throwing peanuts at us from the gallery because that's all they have is peanuts in this community. They're not represented here, and you look around the room, they're not represented for the most part there either. It is imperative as a city, as a county, as a DMC, we are proactive to going to the people who rely on us. We cannot demand on people who are already in tough circumstance that they make the initiative to make those of us with privilege see it from their standpoint. So I want to be clear that I see this from a very different perspective, and any lack of public participation is on us, not on them.
One of the things that's, I just have to say, is really frustrating sitting in a position like mine is that I'm used to living in the community and spending umpteen numbers of hours, evenings, and out in the community, and I think that is the right way for local officials to do that. I'm a volunteer who's got a full-time job an hour and a half away, and so I'm really frustrated that I haven't been able to get out and hear and talk, and I know enough about that, and because I have family members, I'm more in touch than not. But I think what we really need is again, I'm comfortable us leading certain places, but we need those of you who are the eyes and the ears to be really real with us and tell us how we can react to that. I do want to level set one thing on just the financial piece of it. I have heard this thing about people's tax dollars being used for this or not. The thing actually we've got to remember is that the dollars that we're addressing are primarily state dollars. So basically, one of the constituencies we have to answer to is my old constituency. Why is a taxpayer in Minneapolis paying for fixing up Rochester? Well, I gladly go back to Minneapolis and say, I am thrilled that your tax dollars in Minneapolis are working on Rochester, because there is not another initiative in the country that is addressing the urban-rural economic divide as well as this one is. This is helping Rochester and the rest of the area. We have a metric about tax growth on the base here, on the property taxes for the city and the county and the schools. And the good news is just on those dollars, we're delivering on them. But there's a huge opportunity, too, if you choose locally to mobilize some of those dollars that are increasing for the Destination Medical Center and use them for other uses more broadly around the city. And we can do tools here that we aren't able to use elsewhere. Transportation, for instance. In Minneapolis, I can't see a new building being built and take the tax base to use it to grow transit. We can do that in Rochester because of the special tools. So be the eyes and ears for us and come back to us with those things and challenge us with it. We just can't have our ear to the ground like you normally would if you were.
Mayor. Well, just quickly, I want to add to that. I think, the thing I wrote down wasn't particularly positive, so I'm choosing not to share it because I guess the point I want to make is, along with a lot of the positive are some things that are negative in the community and that are as a result of our growth. And we have to acknowledge those too. This isn't the time for that. I want to acknowledge Commissioner's Wright comment and Mayor Rybak's comments. I think sometimes we forget, as leaders and community members, is that this is an economic development tool. What we're doing today, all of us at this table, is creating a better world for our community and our kids in the future. It isn't about us versus them. It's about all of us ensuring that there are jobs and an economy, a strong healthcare facility for generations to come in the future. And I think sometimes people in our community don't understand that. It isn't just doing things to the community to do things in the community. It's an economic tool so that we continue to provide jobs in the future. And that falls on us sometimes to do a better job, and the DMC folks to do a better job of communicating why we're doing what we're doing and the outcomes we expect, which is a better life for everybody ahead, not a worse one.
So I'm going to, what I want to do just to move on to the next question is to connect a few dots I think I heard in this conversation and previous conversations. Because we're talking about the new context as we look forward to phase 2, and it's a bit artificial talking about this in 5-year phases, other than that's how it's defined in the legislation. But what we're really talking about are what are some new issues that we need to be organized around. So if you think about some of our track record of learning over the past 5 years, I think one would say early on we learned how to work together on development projects. So how did we, the city, DMC, our staffs and our organizations figure out how to work together on development projects? And I think 5 years ago, people would have said it's pretty messy. And I think today, people would say it's pretty seamless. I think we figured out how to work together on public space and public realm initiatives. And again, I think 5 years ago, people would have found it pretty confusing and messy. And I think it's getting better. What we did here, and this goes to the union of forces that Jeff, you talked about. I think what we're hearing is there are some new issues that we need to exercise that same muscle around. So affordable housing. How do we apply the union of forces technology that we've created around economic development and public realm to figure out how do we all play together? How do we all work together on the affordable housing question? So that it feels seamless to the community. So it feels like we're all carrying our weight appropriately so. How do we work together on bringing and engaging members of our community so that we have young people more excited is great. That we have more established members of the community that are feeling left behind and don't feel engaged, we can address that. And we need to work to figure out who plays that role in addressing it. If there's communities that have less access to participation, it feels like that's the new context that we need to figure out how to work together on. So I just want to sort of wrap that up in terms of this whole conversation about context and thinking about some of the capacity we've built organizationally and in the community around this union of forces that I think become the position of strength we can work from to address this next set of things that we're hearing about.
Are we ready to
Question number 2.
Oh, okay.
Patrick? Hey, Patrick.
Patrick,
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
there's a context I struggle with how to talk about this, but those of us who are in political offices know there's only so much political energy and will. And I remember learning in graduate school when I was doing policy analysis, there's about, like in the legislature, there'll be like 6 topics that are going to be the hot button topics of a particular year, and they take a lot of the energy. And what I think the DMC board, the DMC EDA, and the DMC staff have to understand is that you consume an enormous amount of the political energy that this community has. And I look at our friends at the city where you've just about eaten them alive. I shouldn't say that, but they've really attended to you. But the amount of political will, the amount of political appetite, the political agenda, you have taken almost all of the airspace in the last 5 years. And so you can talk about a union of forces, but some members of the union have different levels of influence, different levels of authority, different willingness to the table. Some of us hardly ever hear from you. Some of us are not ever asked. Some of us are told what it is that the DMC board or the DMC staff or the DMC EDA is working on. And so the hard thing to talk about is who's not engaged. And we've talked a little bit about the broader community, but I think maybe this concept of political energy or political will is something we need to think about, because elected officials who have full-time jobs elsewhere, and even those of us who don't, only have so much energy. Our public, our citizens only have so much energy that they can focus on having a vibrant democracy or having a vibrant community. And so some of us are really putting a lot of energy into this, and some of us have just barely read the paper, and some of us never even read the paper, but the decisions that are being made are affecting us. And what I think I would encourage the DMC, EDA, and staff and board to talk about is we've put an enormous amount of our political will and energy and our community focus into your success, and we want you to succeed, just as the mayor says. It's in everyone's best interest. But it doesn't necessarily feel like we have the full partnership and the full union of forces. And so some of the people on the council will say to me, well, we don't know. We don't know. So if we aren't really working hand in hand, then we are not able to really truly engage the way we're being called on with all of the interests in the community. Because if people come to me and ask about something and I have no clue, then I'm not really a force for either resolving the community's interest or sharing it with you or bringing us all forward. So think about this political energy, political will. Because to create change, you need to know what the problem is, you need to have viable solutions, and you have to have political will.
Well, I take this really seriously, and I get this. I mean, if you map this out on the scale of what it would be in Minneapolis, I don't know how I would manage all of this, frankly, from the spot I used to sit in. But coach us through that a little bit. I mean, how does, we're volunteers too.
Right.
And and we're trying to do something that's never been done before. So let's realize this isn't business as usual.
Right.
And we're trying to climb a huge mountain. It's going to be fantastic when we get up to the top there, but we're going to have to all do some more. What are some thoughts from you and others on how we can do that? And you always leave meetings like this say it's about communication, but I think it is. I'm hearing about communication, right? So what are some ways that we can do that? And I also, one of the things I take out of your point is how do we prioritize the big things that we're asking so that we focus our political energy and will on things that really matter? Is that part of what I should take out of that?
It's part of it, but it's also, I don't want this to sound negative, and I don't know how to put it in a positive term. We have a legacy of this community of being focused on our major employer. And if you turn this back 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we had two major employers.
Yeah.
And we had a very vital agribusiness that we didn't talk about much, but was very vital. Now that agribusiness is in decline. The other technology company is in decline for this community. So we're really focused a lot on one major employer. But that major employer is really dependent on a lot of other employers in the community as well, in the workforce. And we have a tendency to not question what we need for that major employer, and yet to really be reflective of the opportunity for the community, we have to have the vitality of that major employer and the biotechnology business and so on. We need that. But we have to be open to other kinds of dialogue and exchange, and not think that all that you hear is the DMC board, or all that you see is the EDA, or all that we talk about is just about this project's success.
So I hear two things. I hear the communication issue, and then I also hear about how to solve an issue that is somewhat unique to Rochester, but is really similar to the town gown conversation that South Bend, Indiana has with its big, or whatever else. But I wonder if we could separate those two for a second. And like just on the communication thing, turning to you three, that's the toughest thing, but like how my total sense from the outside is that it seems to be working better with all of you now. I have no idea whether that's true or not. But take what the commissioner just said is there anything we can do on our end or anything to just,
So RT, do not do that to them. Do not do that to them. They're gonna have to say what they always say if things are going better and things are going well.
okay, well, forget
Okay,
whether
so-
it's better or worse. Tell us
So-
how to help.
So the reality is no one, I'm always this person who asks a lot of questions and says the unpopular thing.
That's good.
Okay?
You've been
So
another one, so let's
I've
go.
now said the unpopular thing. Don't turn to them for
I think I
solution.
get the unpopular vote there.
Well, you and I
Yeah,
walk hand
okay,
in hand.
okay, so
I'm
work with
just
me
saying,
now.
I
What's,
want-
so
I
how do
want
we,
you
how
just-
do we help?
I want us to look at this over time. I think we need to communicate more often. Lisa started coming to meet with the county board quarterly. Amen. We need to do more of that. We need to engage in more dialogue. We need to work closer together instead of in our little fiefdoms. And we need to treat each other respectfully, and we don't always do that even between units of government. So, I am just, I'm just saying, we got the crazy aunt in the attic. And we just need to say, we've got the crazy aunt in the attic, and let's be kind to her.
Well, thank you for taking her out for a walk,
And
and I
let's-
think we ought to stick with this, because this is a very important thing that we're doing right now. This is really, really important. So let's,
This is
yeah.
foundational if we want
Yeah.
to have the union enforced.
So I think we should, you know,
So to that,
Patrick's moderating this, so let him. do that.
Really?
Sorry. No, but I think this is a great place for us to be, so let's not rush it.
I love what, I'm not as outspoken as you, Sheila, but thank you.
That's a shock.
No, but I do want to say that what I really want to do here, and I don't do this because I'm calmer in my old age, is just get up and flip the tables and say that the solutions to these problems that the community face are not at this table. All the challenges that we face going forward are going to be bottom-up solutions from the people in our community. We need to strengthen them, we need to engage them, we need to empower them, because they're going to solve these problems. DMC, one of the ways that we're setting ourselves up for failure is it's a top-down methodology. We need to be bottoms up, and until we bring those folks along with us, they're gonna solve the problems that we're trying to figure out how to solve here. That's my 2 cents.
I want to know, give me a specific example, Michael, what you want us to do. You want to engage these people. I'm willing to engage people. Tell me how you want to engage people. Engaging people doesn't mean you get your way, but hey, if they want to come and talk, tell me what you want. Give me a concrete example.
A concrete example that I would give, we just had a tremendous cold snap, and we don't have the area where we put $20 million into the heart of the city. We have more homeless there than ever. We don't have a facility for them, and that facility didn't have the community volunteers necessarily in place to deal with their demand. Those are things as a community that can be handled ahead of time. Those are things that anyone in our community can step up and challenge. These are kind of engagements on core issues that are really affecting people's lives that we're not doing. On the spot, that's the first one that popped into my head.
if I can jump in.
Go ahead, Nick, yeah.
I had one email I sent to Lisa prior to this meeting to kind of say some of the things I thought were really important. And what I'm kind of trying to ferret out here, and I think Commissioner Cassaden is saying the same thing, is there's like a throughput dilemma we're facing. And one of the challenges is priorities and making sure that we share priorities at the county level, at the city level, and at the DMC level, so that it's not a frustrating exercise, which is sometimes DMC will have a priority and it'll have to get added on to a committee agenda that is already packed, and we'll have 10 minutes to cover something that should be a legislative priority for us because it's going to be a multi-decade affecting decision. So what I leave and when I look back, the number one thing we can do is make sure if transit is what we're going to do this year, transit's what we're doing this year. And if you have a non-transit thing, sorry, it's not a priority. And if we don't set priorities, everything is the same. And we can't complain about not making focused progress because there's such a breadth of concerns that we have to solve with the DMC effort. If we don't focus, you're not going to see identifiable progress. It's just too broad of a project. So let's pick what our focus areas are and let's commit to making change in those over the year. And then next year, let's reaffirm that. So that shares when Lisa goes to the county, they're not asking her about something she's unprepared to talk about. Because it will be, that wasn't a legislative priority for us this year. We're not prepared to make motion in that way. And I think we've had this historically. It's just not been a clear process. That's the number one thing for me is I love to tell people if they say, affordable housing, where's the progress? We say, it's a DMC objective this year. Here are the progress steps DMC made. Here's what the city made. Here's what the county made. Now we've optimized our kind of model for legislation, which I think is really critical right now, especially in this time where this project is.
Lisa, I know you had your hand up.
I just wanted to I won't speak for my two colleagues whom I think work very well together. We all work together. I just wanted, in defense of Sheila, you were saying don't put us there. I actually am thrilled to be put there. I'm actually thrilled to answer the question, how are you doing? And we've come a long way in 4 years. I feel very confident that my administrative colleagues we're working hand in glove, and I just feel like we've made great progress. Is it perfect? Of course not. Is it all about communication? Yes. But I feel I don't want anybody to walk away thinking we don't do well together, because we're in each other's office almost every day. So I think it's very positive. And I'm not.
Councilmember Palmer.
For a person that spent the summer and the fall campaigning and talking to people, I'd have to say that the DMC people have reached out. And the first question they've always asked is, what are you hearing in the neighborhoods? What are you hearing about DMC? What can we do different? And that comes from staff. And for me, that has been nice. They've offered to meet with me at any time I want to meet with them. I think the staff has done a good job. We have a lot of priorities in our communities and a lot of different issues that come up. But the staff do listen to at least listen to what I had to say.
I think I'm going to, go ahead, Pam,
Need
please.
one.
Well, I'm the new kid on the block, so I've been on the EDA board for about a month now, I think. And I just thought I would offer some perspective as relatively new and not been in the middle of this exercise opportunity and a little bit of muck in the last 4+ years. But I would just echo the comments of Mayor Rybak about how unique this is. And as a former deputy mayor for the city of St. Paul and economic development director, a former commissioner of finance, and a vice president at the University of Minnesota charged with campus planning, among other things, the investment that the state of Minnesota is making in this community is exceptional. I have no comparison to that, except perhaps for northern Minnesota, where the taconite tax that they produce up there was allowed to be reinvested in that geography. The investment is exceptional, and to advance the goal that the state has about the vitality long-term for the city of Rochester, immense resources are being invested in this community. I find that really exciting, particularly as a Waseca native, and who always got the health care here in Minnesota or in Rochester for her family. So this is a really precious opportunity, and to advance this opportunity, a new organization was created and plunked down right in the middle of existing systems and organizational structure. Is it going to be awkward from time to time? Of course. It's awkward for Mayo, I'm sure, even to work with this entity and think about joint planning. So I'm along for the ride to do something really meaningful that has long-term impact, and I trust, as part of this group, that everyone here has positive intent. Everyone here has good intent about making the most of this opportunity, and I think it's a really welcome opportunity to have all of us at this table today, and particularly for me, so new in the chute, so to speak. But I think it is really about believing that everyone has positive intent, and when there's an issue, working together with positive intent about how are we going to fix it, how are we going to modify it, how are we going to improve. Because it will be messy, because it's new, and because it's meaningful. And I'm just happy to be a part of it.
To jump in very briefly, RT, when you say you're kind of restricted by where you can invest, I would submit to you that you've already stepped outside there with the mobility hub discussion, which then lends itself right well to the county's view of how transit's going to work. We've always been concerned that our $3 million is very Rochester-centric and transit's there, but we know it's a far bigger problem in order to get workforce, the housing that they can afford to live in. They may not have a viable car, but transit is very important. So if we feel there's restrictions, we should fight those. We could take issue with it, just do it, beg right, not ask for permission, but ask for forgiveness. That's my view of the world, and that's where I think we have the biggest impact, is this thing will then spread if we can then accept the notion that we're not just talking about this little area downtown.
I think that's really good counsel, and it's, it is actually what we just did. There was, obviously
It's
advice
a good
on
start.
all that, but, one of the things, this is a small issue, but it's one that's been kind of a pet project of mine from the beginning, is all those people at 5 o'clock who leave this town, get on a bus. And I started asking questions about where those buses end up. And one by one, those, from my understanding, super anecdotally, there are a whole lot of transit stops on the outskirts of a city in a parking lot in the middle of somewhere. Imagine what we could do if those stops went to the main streets of Waseca and name it. And we, in that way, could be doing what I think is, this is not just about Rochester. This is about the fact that when you get outside of Rochester, the economic growth is really challenged. So we could list all of that, and we do, because the employment comes from there, but we could do more to make sure the employees land in certain places. So I'm all about that, and having been to Albert Lee and Austin and all of that, I certainly got my own earful on how we should be trying to help there. So I'm all about doing that, and I'm not against, and those of you with more legislative experience, I'm not against going back to the legislature and saying, you know what, as we hit year 4 and 5 and all of that with this initiative, we've got some real opportunity to grow the economy in the rest of the state. Do you object to that? And I don't think there's an objection. So I'm game for it. I just want to make sure one of the sensitivities I want to have in my position is not overstepping. And, I've had to play pretty aggressive role, especially in transportation, which I felt needed a lot of that. So just personally, in a chair role, I'm playing a real push-pull of not wanting to overstep, but not wanting to under-deliver on what people expect. And I don't have the answer to that.
We're going to try 2 more questions quickly that I think attempt to...
Well, this is good. We're getting at stuff.
Absolutely. So,
Question 6.
Question 6.
Yeah. The next 2 questions have to do with priorities and goals. So this is actually a very nice segue, and we want to hear your thoughts on these. So question 6 is, the city of Rochester has a set of priorities which were presented to you earlier in the meeting, and we'll put them up on the screen here. Which of these city priorities should DMC be giving more attention? Use your polling device and enter in one of the numbers. And then also take a moment to take some notes on your note card, on your question card, about rationale of why you chose which one you did. Okay, we're ready to see the results.
Great. So we don't have time to fully engage in this conversation, but we did want to get this out because we came here with the idea that we would start from city priorities, and in a moment we'll cover county priorities and ask this question, where should DMC be spending more time? How they spend more time on these issues is a longer conversation, but does anyone who rated the first one, voted for the first one, want to say why they voted for that, and one comment on that?
Well, yeah, I voted for that one, but I think we just had that conversation. And I think that the conversation that we had directly relates to, number one, enhance the quality of life, not just for a group of people, but for everybody.
Great. How about number 2? Who commented on or who voted for number 2 and would want to say something about that?
I think that the DMC can form and be the catalyst for bringing the people together, not necessarily make all the decisions, not manage growth and development, not necessarily balance infrastructure, that's the job of the city council and county, but to really bring those groups together to consolidate into a single culture.
Great. Nice. Number 3, who voted for number 3 and why?
Well, I can claim that one. In the minority. But it really does relate to, in my mind, a lot of the rest of them, including the quality of life issue, because I think that's where the discomfort in the community comes from, is that we need to make sure we manage it properly to tamp down some of the anxiety that we feel in the other sectors.
Thank you. And number 4?
I think I voted for that one primarily because, and they're all important certainly, but number 4, pragmatically, that's the world I live in. As an elected person, we're constantly challenged to balance finite resources, whether it be monetary, staff, and so that's a constant challenge to balance public infrastructure.
Does that relate to Councilmember Campion's mention of focus, or Commissioner Cascaden's talk about use of political capital, political energy?
Certainly.
Great. So let's do question number 7.
Yep, in our final 3 minutes. So Olmsted County has a set of goals, and we saw these presented earlier in the meeting. So of these goals, which one should DMC be giving more attention? Use your
Heidi, I
podium.
should give you the chance to lobby for where people vote.
They're all important.
I think we have the little red "I voted" stickers available too, so we'll pass those out when you leave.
Okay, I think we're ready to see the results.
Lots of people talked about safe and healthy community. Anybody want to, Commissioner?
Oh, I voted for that one. I mean, we're an arm of the federal government in the state. In Minnesota, that's what counties do. We take care, that's our they're all important, but our number one thing is to take care of the vulnerable and communities that can't speak for themselves and that, need a little extra help. I mean, that's what we do. That's what counties do in the state of Minnesota.
And I might add that number 1 is related to conversations that we just have had on quality of life and being inclusive and making sure that the community comes along with this bigger process.
Great. Anybody?
Patrick, before
Anybody?
you leave, I think it's important too that it says communities, not Rochester or not Olmsted County, but communities. And we've talked about that earlier, how this has got to go beyond 12 block area. It's got to go beyond the city of Rochester and has to go beyond the county. This is a regional thing, and if this is it's to make all these areas safe and healthy, not just this city or the county, but the entire region.
Great. Anybody else want to comment on where they voted?
I'll just add, I had number 4 only because I think of the question to me which stuck out was the DMC part, not what the county's responsibility is. And I was thinking of the operational excellence as a way of DMC driving more of that for the communities.
Thank you. So, Mayor, I'm going to turn this back to you to close this out. Before I do that, I do want to ask folks to thank Kevin, who has been scribing, and you may want to come up afterwards and see the notes, but please join me in thanking Kevin Shaw for that. And Tracy as well. So,
Thank you very much.
So Mayor, I'll leave it to you to bring us home.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for their frankness and the beginning of a conversation, and I hope we can continue this really honest, good exchange to keep going forward. I should have just shut up after Pam Wheelock talked about good intentions and how unique this development is. No one else in the country that I can figure out has the opportunity we have. And it's bigger than any of us, and it is bigger than the levels of government or the individual places that we represent. And that's amazingly cool. We have a great opportunity, so let's be recklessly kind to each other, meaning stay very honest, and certainly start with me and each of us. So thanks all you guys for being here. We got a lot done, and let's keep moving.
Thank you.